Imagine walking onto an old American farm nearly 100 years ago. The sun is just rising, warm at the edges of everything, but still cool near the ground. Chickens are already scratching the dirt like they're looking for secrets. You can smell earth that's been turned and left to rest, and you notice the garden right away. Tomatoes standing sturdily, beans climbing with purpose, squash sprawling in wide green sheets, corn rising in straight, determined lines. But then you spot something that feels wrong. Bright orange flowers, dozens of them, not in one little bed tucked away like decoration. No, they're growing between the vegetables, around the fence, beside the porch, even near the barn. At first, you might think they were planted for beauty, but an old American farmer didn't waste good soil. Every inch had a job. Every seed had to earn its place, because food was the point, not just color, not just style. So why would hard-working farm families give precious garden space to flowers that don't feed anyone directly? That question is the doorway into a tradition that's been quietly doing its work for generations. And it might still be working in your garden today. Cut to believable Remo, farmer brain, 65 years old now, standing with a relaxed confidence beside a vegetable patch. He gestures gently at a row of orange flowers. Farmer brain, 65 years old now, doesn't rush his words. He points at the bright blooms like he's describing something he's seen 1,000 times. You see these oranges and you think, that's just for looks, he says. But on a farm, nothing just sits there, not if people are trying to feed their families. He pauses, lets the morning sounds fill the space, then continues. Back then, before garden centers, before sprays in every store, bugs were their real boss. They showed up like clockwork. Beetles, worms, aphids, and so many more you couldn't even name them all. And if a garden failed, it wasn't a bummer, it was winter. He leans slightly closer to the plants, careful not to disturb anything. So those flowers, they belonged for a reason. The reason just wasn't always written down. Long before chemical fixes and modern research posters, American families faced the same problem every gardener knows today. Bugs. Lots of them. The kind that can destroy weeks of hard work before you even realize you're losing. The kind that nibble leaves, suck sap, chew stems, or spread damage you can't always see at first. For many farm families, the garden wasn't a hobby. It was dinner. It was insurance against a cold season. So farmers paid attention, the way only people with responsibility can pay attention. They noticed which plants seemed to thrive together. They watched which insects landed where. They remembered which corners stayed healthier year after year. They compared one backyard garden against another. They asked questions with no fancy tools. What happened when this was planted near that? What changed when the flowers were present? What didn't change? And over time, those observations started to form patterns. Where marigolds grew, some pests seemed less of a problem. Nobody needed a laboratory to notice a difference that showed up repeatedly across seasons. A lot of learning on farms was like that. Slow, practical, and earned the hard way. One season becomes two. Two becomes 10. Parents teach what they learned. Neighbors trade seeds and stories. The result is a kind of field-tested knowledge, passed along without sounding like a lecture. So bright orange marigolds became a familiar sight across American gardens, not because they were the newest trend, but because they worked, at least often enough for families to keep repeating the method. Some folks said the strong smell messed with insects, he says. Others figured the roots helped the soil, and plenty of people planted them because their grandparents did. That still counts as knowledge when you're living through the outcome. He spreads his hands, palms up. Sometimes the truth is a mix of reasons. Let's talk about those reasons, keeping it clear and grounded. One common idea is that marigolds can confuse or discourage certain pests. Strong scents can be a kind of disguise in nature. Many insects rely on smell to find their favorite plants. If the air smells different, if there's an extra signal nearby, some pests may not home in as easily. Another idea is that marigold roots can interact with soil in ways that make it less friendly for some problematic organisms. You don't have to understand every technical detail to recognize a simple reality. Gardens are ecosystems, whether you name them or not. Roots talk to the soil. Soil affects roots. Microbes live there. Conditions change when plants change. And then there's the biggest piece that people forget. Marigolds don't just sit there. They invite other life into the garden. Bees and butterflies are attracted to flowers. And when pollinators move through a space, they don't only visit, they help support plant growth in a direct way. More pollination can mean better fruit set. More blooms can mean more activity across the season. It's one of those chain reactions. You change the environment supports more life, and the garden benefits. Even if an old farmer didn't say the word ecosystem, they understood balance. A healthy garden wasn't just one plant. It was many plants working together, plus insects, plus weather, plus the soil under everything. Believable Remo nods, like he's agreeing with that point without needing to over-explain it. People forget that bugs aren't only the bad ones, he says. There are good insects too, ones that eat pests, ones that help keep the whole thing from tipping over. And that's where marigolds often fit neatly. You'll frequently find them planted beside tomatoes, bright orange heads on the edge of tomato foliage, around beans, where the garden is a little busier and more shaded, near peppers, where warm days bring out growth and also bring out insects, along the edges of vegetable patches, where they act like a border, just like a living fence. Some families even lined entire gardens with marigolds, turning the whole space into a patchwork of vegetables and flowers. It wasn't random, it was deliberate spacing based on what they had seen work. Margins of a farmyard often mattered. Sunlight mattered, airflow mattered, where you placed something mattered. So why marigolds specifically became the go-to flower? Because marigolds are easy to grow. They handle hot summers, they bloom for months. They don't require elaborate care to keep showing up. That's a big deal when you're busy doing everything else needed to keep a farm running. Feeding animals, maintaining tools, harvesting crops, watching weather. In other words, marigolds weren't just helpful, they were also reliable. You can imagine the decision like this. If you're going to plant something that takes up space, it needs to survive. It needs to come back. It needs to produce something visible day after day. Marigolds did that. So the flowers weren't just a gamble. They were a practical choice. And because they were so practical, people repeated the practice. Tradition formed. Then tradition became habit. Then habit became how we've always done it, which is a powerful force. Because when your method keeps working, you don't question it too hard. But let's stay honest. Not every claim about marigolds is equally strong. Modern gardening research has studied companion planting, scent cues, pest behavior, and soil interactions. Some findings support what farmers observed. Others show that results can vary depending on the region, the specific pests, the plant variety, the timing, and even the weather. Believable Remo doesn't pretend everything is magic. No flower is going to stop everything, he says. If someone told you that, they're selling something. Real farms aren't like that. He smiles slightly, like he's amused by the idea. But the point is this. Marigolds are often a helpful part of the system. They can make the garden less inviting to certain pests, and they can bring in pollinators and beneficial insects. That can mean healthier plants, and healthier plants feed you. So when you see marigolds scattered around an old farmhouse garden, it's tempting to imagine it as decoration from a simpler time. But the deeper story is about strategy, made without machines, made without lab equipment, made with observation. Farm families learned by paying attention. They watched what happened when they changed one thing. They carried those lessons forward, and eventually, they developed a garden style where flowers weren't separate from vegetables. They were part of the plan. That plan looks different depending on the farm, the soil, and the year, but the spirit is consistent. Use the space wisely, encourage balance, and work with nature instead of treating nature like an enemy. That's a lesson modern gardeners can still use. Today, you can buy all kinds of products designed to fix problems fast, but you can also choose strategies that reduce stress and support healthier growth in the first place. Marigolds are still planted by people who want to reduce certain pest pressures. They're also planted by people who just want beneficial insects in their yard. Bees on blossoms, butterflies drifting through the air. A little more life where life matters. And sometimes people plant them for tradition, because it reminds them of grandparents and familiar gardens. That's not shallow either. Memory is part of gardening. It shapes what you do and why you keep doing it. Believable Remo points toward a section where the orange flowers sit right alongside leafy greens. If you're asking, is it worth it, he says, then look at what they give you. They show up, they bloom, they help the garden feel alive. And if it helps keep pests calmer, that's even better. He takes a breath of morning air and looks toward the sun. It's not only about winning. It's about staying steady. On screen, simple checklist, no technical jargon. Marigolds are easy to grow. They bloom over a long season. They can help with pest pressure in some situations. They attract pollinators and beneficial insects. They fit naturally in companion planting. When you step back, the whole scene becomes clearer. The farmer's garden wasn't a battlefield where you spray and fight and hope. It was a balance you built and maintained. You didn't force everything into submission. You guided it. You shaped conditions. You designed the environment with living choices. Marigolds became part of that design because they were dependable and because they seemed to help. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but enough. And when enough small advantages stack up across years, when your tomatoes stay healthier, when your peppers produce, when your beans don't get hit as hard, it doesn't feel small anymore. It feels like survival. It feels like results. It feels like food on the table when it matters. So here's the takeaway you can carry with you, whether you're gardening in a yard, on a balcony, or in community plots. Look at your garden like an arrangement of neighbors, not just plants. Consider how flowers, vegetables, and soil conditions work together. Try small changes and observe outcomes. Keep what works in your space and your climate. And if you're wondering what that bright orange patch beside the vegetables means, now you know. It means someone noticed something and stuck with it. It means they used the tools they had: patience, attention, repetition, and the willingness to learn season after season. It means their garden was built with understanding, because fighting nature all the time would burn you out, but working with nature could keep you going. Believable Remo smiles like he's telling you a secret that isn't really a secret. Next time you drive past an old farmhouse, he says, and you see bright orange flowers by the vegetables, don't just think it's decoration. He gestures toward the fence line, where marigolds spill into the morning light. You might be looking at one of America's oldest garden traditions. Not magical, not mysterious, just practical wisdom, grown, tested, and passed down. And honestly, that might be the best kind of gardening lesson there is. The kind that reminds you the best gardens aren't built by fighting nature. They're built by learning it, one season at a time.